next PSSA Crossroads. We're going to be going over international relations with the United States. So talking about, of course, the stuff that's been going on with Ukraine and the United States, Mexico, Canada, just like your general thoughts, questions, ideas on the current political climate with our neighbors and everyone else. Y'all can start with that, whatever topic you'd like to, and also in a little bit he's gonna pass around a attendance sheet.
Mm-hmm. And yes, as usual, if this is your first time here, we do it every week, every Wednesday at noon. We hope you all will join us. It's an open forum. Yes, in a few minutes I'll be passing around an attendance sheet that you can use to verify your attendance. If you put a faculty name next to your name, we will contact that faculty member. Can't guarantee they'll do anything about it, but if you want to bug them for extra credit, we can verify that you were here. Also, our live stream, which is going out to our YouTube channel, will also verify that you were here. So let's get started. I think maybe the best question to ask to begin is currently what is America's place in the rest of the world? How would you describe our position in the rest of the world, vis-a-vis the rest of the world right now?
Since World War II, the U.S. has been the world police in a sense. Before World War II, we were isolationists and all that, but after that, with the Cold War starting up and getting involved in many foreign affairs and other wars across the planet, we became the sense of the world police, and it's been going on since the 40s, and we've been doing it for 80-something years now, but we're kind of seeing to the point now that we're seeing a lot of people, especially the group you think are be the most pro-U.S. intervention, used to be neoconservatives. They're kind of a dying faction in the Republican Party. A lot of Republicans now are a lot more isolationist than ever before, than we've seen since the Cold War start. So we're kind of seeing that shift happen. Like I think just yesterday, I just saw a news article saying that Trump was looking at possibilities of giving up on NATO. Even though Congress did ratify and saying that we can't leave, the president cannot leave NATO, there's still talk about it happening right now. And what's going to happen? We have no idea what the next 4 years entail with our role in the rest of the world.
So as of this year, it's literally 7 years ago?
Yeah.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
That's about right. What about the rest of you? What do you think? Is that about right?
Yeah, I would just say going off of that, there definitely is a shift. I know it's not everybody, but for sure in the Republican Party. But I think it's more of just like a big question mark of like, why are we paying for all this? I kind of personally go back and forth on it from like kind of a realist perspective. Like I think the U.S. as arguably the strongest country has more power over like actually ending conflicts like Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Hamas. But I don't know, the shift in general being like, why are we funding all these things? And I think people are really starting to just really question, like, you know, if I'm personally having a hard time putting food on the table or personally having a hard time at home, why are we going to put like all these resources abroad? But it's obviously not that simple.
Yeah.
But that is how a lot of people view it, understandably.
Mm-hmm. So you think we're on the verge maybe of a fundamental shift? Become more isolationist again?
No, I don't think it's a shift that will hit like everybody, but I do think it will.
More of a conversation about it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think now with Trump, especially backing out from Russia, Ukraine of it all, and basically telling Europe, like, hey, it's your backyard, deal with it. Like, you guys really need to step it up. And of course, Macron is like eating this up because he's been talking about how they think that Europe really needs some sort of stronger force, whether that's like a EU military or whatnot. So.
Now, do you think Trump's position and Trump's interests in changing things will last beyond Trump?
That's where I kind of get iffy with it. I think if it is a strong shift, it'll be during him and then maybe change after him. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Well, I think regardless of whether America decides to, the government decides to change its position on the matter, I think there's been kind of irreparable damage done to America's reputation. I mean, it started in 2016 when, like, you know, obviously Trump pulled out of like the nuclear deal with Iran. It's like, why would a country ever trust us to hold them to a deal? You know what I mean? I mean, if you look at what happened to Gaddafi, you know, he denuclearized and, you know, his people killed him. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're an authoritarian dictator, why are you going to try and make a deal with the United States if, like, there's no, like, guarantee that, like, in 4 years it's gone and it's done?
Exactly. Like, I've seen what the common belief in Europe now is, especially since 2016, is that a lot of Europeans don't feel confident in the U.S. anymore because they feel like, oh, maybe once Trump's gone, another president will come in, but 4 years later, what if someone else just like Trump comes in and just keep reverting it? Like, you can't have a reliable ally that keeps flip-flopping. And Trump has changed the U.S. and the Republican Party into this kind of flip-flop now, where it honestly now it's that if Democrats come in, they try reverting a lot of the things that Trump did in 2016 and 2020 now, with what Biden tried doing with going back to the Paris climate deal and doing a lot more helping our allies and all that. But then Trump, when as soon as he became president, they reverted all back again. So most Europeans and hell, Canada, Mexico, they're all looking at us like, we can't trust them anymore. Like, we got to start thinking on our own. And again, like what she said with Macron, Macron's been saying for years that Europe needs to become its own power. Like they already have the EU, but they need to become more of a block between the U.S. and Russia now, because they feel like the U.S. is no longer reliable to protect them. They need their own military at this point now.
I do agree with that point. I think especially because of like the change between like Obama and then Trump and then Biden and then Trump again, and we're just like flip-flopping. I feel like that we just seem less reliable to other places.
100%.
So one of the reasons that the post-war structure took place was precisely because we were consistent across administrations from 1945 up to 2016. I don't know.
I don't think it's like consistency, but I think it's like such drastic changes. Like I feel like liberalism and like conservatism wasn't as,
We weren't as divided.
It wasn't really as divided, no.
And now it's just completely isolated from each other.
And also during the Cold War, there was a much more like singular focus on like, you know, the Soviet Union rather than like the kind of ambiguous, hard to like pin down terror that we're hunting down. So, you know, there was a little more focus obviously, and a little more like, you know, well, there was a little extra unity generated in NATO when Russia invaded Ukraine, but that's kind of like gone out the window now that Trump's like reneging on helping Ukraine.
Now, I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I know a lot of people said that the end of the Cold War deprived us of a common enemy. And that may be, that might explain why we've sort of turned on ourselves in the last couple of decades.
That is definitely probably true. Like the U.S. since the Cold War, we always had someone to kind of like, I don't like saying this, but someone to blame, a scapegoat. We had that in the Soviet Union, and we're kind of having it now with China, but it's on the same point where people feel like what the Soviet Union did in the Cold War.
It doesn't feel like it's, as somebody who remembers the Cold War, it doesn't have the same feel.
From what my parents have said and my grandparents, when I asked them the same thing, it's like it never felt the same. Like the Soviet Union, there was the genuine fear of nuclear war or like a global conflict like that. Between China, it's more economic, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know whether I look at it or not. I'm too young for the Cuban Missile Crisis, but you know that was literally an existential crisis. There were people, not just ordinary Americans, but there were people in the White House in October of 1962 who went home that Friday, and they actually said, they've written down in their memoirs, we went home that Friday and we weren't sure we were going to be coming back on Monday.
Yeah. Like my grandmother, she experienced it, and she says like it was like the scariest few days of her life, because she says everyone was just terrified.
Yeah. Like
she like I remember asking like, do you remember what that was like? Because I had to do it for an assignment back in middle school, and she's like, no, I remember it, going to school, and everyone was just very scared. Like she was somewhere in high school, like I think she was a junior or senior, and she's just like, no one felt confident.
Did she tell you about duck and cover drills?
Yeah, she had to do that. Yeah, she did do that. She had to do the same thing.
It was a standard thing in all schools. You had fire drills and you had duck and cover drills, where you were taught to get under your desk. You put your head down, you stick your butt out in the air, because they said if you're going to get hit by anything, you'd rather it be your butt than your face. Of course,
Yeah.
in a nuclear blast, it kind of doesn't matter in the long run.
That's what she even
But they
said.
told you that, you know.
She was like, a nuclear bomb was going to kill me regardless, but she said it was just mainly there to make the kids feel better anyway. Like, you're like still, you feel like you're doing something at least, but she knew that like she was kind of young when they were first implementing it, but she knew that like at any moment a war could start between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and it was always just that looming anxiety in the back of your head that you're always thinking of.
Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, even with like, I guess like a more economic Cold War with China, even though like both of our economies would immediately collapse if we like broke off trade relations, but you know, America's like, you know, tariffing or whatever is also kind of starting to break down like our economic hegemony as well as our like military and political hegemony. And it's like making like, well, China isn't gonna like randomly have like this weird nationalistic fervor and tariff us like crazy, you know? Like Chinese investment might become more reliable than US investment, and you know, and more countries, especially in the third world, when we're like clamping down on our US aid, they're gonna be like, oh, like which like sphere do we fall into? Oh, well, China's the one that's actually gonna like, you know, is going to, you know, use the soft power of like investing money and like, you know, building up these like ports and stuff to
They
like,
do that in Africa.
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard some people, I mean, again, I'm not the expert, but I've heard some people say that in part the demise of USAID is essentially handing Africa over to China.
It really is. One of the big things that China's been doing since, I don't know, 2009, something like that, is the Belt and Road Initiative, where they've done massive amount of funding across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and even bits in Europe and Southeast Asia, where they're just sending billions, and I mean billions of dollars worth of loans and aid to these underdeveloped countries to build infrastructure and all of this. But what's happened is that a lot of the times, these countries can't pay back these crazy loans. These have super high interest rates, and they don't have enough time to pay it back. Because these countries are extremely poor. What happened in Sri Lanka, I think in 2022, is that China built a gigantic port in the capital, Sri Lanka. They didn't need it, but they built it regardless. They couldn't pay back. China in the clause says, okay, now we can legally own it until you make up your payment for about 50 years. And Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan economy collapsed, and I think, I forgot what something happened, like they literally, civilians like raided the parliament building because their economy was collapsing as like live right there. And it collapsed the whole economy in Sri Lanka. I don't know what's happened in the last few years, but I remember when that was happening. The Belt and Road Initiative is a good thing and a bad thing. It is trying to help these countries, but a lot of times it is using China as like inserting their influence by kind of like strong arming these nations and accepting these horrible deals and ruining their economy. And China can like, oh, I'm going to take this and take this and take this now.
And I mean, that's part of like, you know, that's what like USAID isn't just us like, you know, out of the kindness of our heart,
Oh, definitely
like, handing
not.
out like, you know, food and money and all that.
100% it's
It's also us, you know, being able to say like, oh, well, now you have like, you know, more favorable like natural resource exports, and you're going to comply with free trade, so that we can get all of your like natural minerals for free, or you know, like, you know, without like any like tariffs or duties.
Yeah, both
on them,
sides
we
are
can
guilty
get
of
them out.
that.
So like, you know, it's not just like, you know, I don't know, like some kind of like liberal like happiness project where we're like just spending money on like giving like Africans like vaccines or something out of the kindness of our heart when like Americans need it. But it's like, it's us like, you know, this is us like asserting like our economic dominance so that like we can bring like the bacon home and like have cheaper consumer goods here.
Yeah, no, it's not, I mean, vaccines often need boosters, and you're going to get them from the same place you got it in the first place. Roads and buildings need upkeep, and the repairs need to be standardized, and so you got to get them from the same place you got it in the first place, and that helps us. What else?
We were talking about
Yeah.
the consistency between American presidents upwards to Trump. We were talking about that briefly for a moment. You were saying how was every president like consistent upwards to Trump, and I was going to say how since the 40s with Truman and FDR, really, even though the domestic policies have changed throughout each presidency between Republican and Democrat, it is true that I do feel like every presidency up to 2016, or honestly, I'll probably say 9/11, honestly, I think it was a big change. Every president kind of had similar foreign policy beliefs. I wouldn't say domestic, but a lot of it had the same foreign policy agreement that we're going against the Soviets. We got to help our allies. We got to we get involved when we can, and we help when we can, and we also are not afraid from intervening in a war that we probably shouldn't be intervening in, but we still do nonetheless. And it all changed. Honestly, it does kind of seem like it changed in 9/11 when that whole Cold War was ending, and it shifted American politics again into invading Afghanistan and Iraq and holding troops there for years, and then Trump coming in and just like pulling, demanding about pulling out troops, like talking about it and just giving the idea. It just shifted it. It really did, and that's when the consistency changed. Honestly, was in that last 20 years, really.
It's been building even before that, but yes, you're right. They used to say that partisanship stops at the water's edge, that our foreign policy was bipartisan. Then we might have some disagreements, but
there was
all together on the major implications.
Again, you saw Vietnam, like plenty of Americans didn't agree with Vietnam, of course, but like honestly though, a large portion of politicians did agree with it though. There was that bipartisanship that did agree that, we should be in Vietnam to prevent the domino effect from happening where each country falls to communism. But now we're seeing it in the Ukraine war that there's just flat out, like it's half and half now. People saying we should help Ukraine or we don't need to help Ukraine now. It is not, it's completely partisan now.
I think the hesitation is kind of understandable though, and we're talking about China earlier, and it's kind of weird to me that I think we do underestimate them for some reason. I don't know if it's like our culture of like America #1 or whatever. You know, you could apply the same logic to the conflicts today. Like we were kind of misled. Like a lot of the reason why we, obviously went that far is because of how misled we were. Whether it was, over there or here, miscommunication, all the above. So like, I feel like maybe part of some Americans' hesitancy could be like, well, we don't really know what's going on over there. Like, do we want to get involved type of thing?
Well, I mean, in terms of like Americans not like really knowing foreign policy, I can't remember the survey, and someone can maybe look this up, but there was a survey that like polled Americans on like what they think, like how much foreign spending they believe the American government engages in. And people were like, it's 25%, and that's way too high. It should be 10%. And the real number is 1%.
Yeah, it's 1%
of the federal budget. So there's like this massive, complete disconnect that we spend like a quarter of our budget on like foreign aid, and we only spend like 1% of it. So and that's really, I mean, that's kind of concerning for like, I guess like how willingly ignorant that is, because like that takes like 1 second of Googling, and then you can see on the pie chart that like foreign aid spending is like this tiny %.
The interesting thing about those surveys is that in the same surveys, people were asked, what do you think would be too little a percentage? And the consensus was about 3% would be too little. And yet even that's 3 times what we actually do spend.
Like, I was seeing about how on Twitter, like he was talking about with people thinking that we're spending way too much. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I use it a lot. I get a lot of my news is from that. I know it's not the best website to use, but I still like using it. And I can go on there and I see people talking about, we're spending so much money, we're spending billions of dollars to Ukraine. We could be using the same money in the U.S. and helping our own citizens. The thing is, though, I feel like a lot of Americans do not, when they see on the news, when Biden was president, $100 billion sent to Ukraine, they think, oh my gosh, we're just sending pallets worth of cash to Ukraine. This is ridiculous. A lot of Americans don't understand that like most of that, the money is all equipment. It's old equipment from the 80s and 90s that we had from excess of the Cold War that we're sending to Ukraine. And they think that we can somehow turn that M1 Abrams into money and send it to some, to people that got hit by the hurricane in North Carolina. They're like, I saw people saying, oh, we should send this $1 billion from Ukraine to help the people in North Carolina got hit. It's like, what's an Apache helicopter going to do to help these people out? It's not going to do anything. We're not sending pallets of cash. We're sending equipment. And a lot of people don't understand that.
And also, I mean, a lot of the money we do send is like loans, and we expect them to pay it back to us with interest. So we're actually going to make money off of the conflict. And also, American weapons manufacturers, companies in America, a very large industry in America, weapons manufacturers are making a killing on it, which is a homegrown American industry, American jobs, workers that are obviously doing really well.
Yeah, I've seen like literally like armaments factories starting up back in Pennsylvania that haven't been turned down in years just because they needed to resupply the new excess of artillery shells or guns to Ukraine, and they need to start amping it up. Like these are hot. These are getting more people working in factories. It's helping the manufacturing sector. I don't know why people are complaining about it. They just don't know. It really is. It's just sad.
Well, I mean, honestly, some of the, I think like some of the reason for this, right, is because there's kind of like a realignment. Well, I mean, it's not like a realignment like with every American, because there's a lot of Republicans that are grumbling about how friendly Trump is with Putin. You know what I mean? They're they'll still set that neocon mindset of like Russia is the enemy.
Yeah.
So they don't like it, the direction that it's going in. But I mean, there's a lot of like, you can see some of this like even outside of the political well, I mean, it is in the political sphere, but pundits, right? I mean, you saw like when Tucker Carlson went over to Russia and he went to like a supermarket in Russia and he's like, oh, look how great it is. They have this thing where look how cheap the price of bread is. This is way better than Biden's America, like talking about like war-starved Russia, talking about how like apparently this is like better than like a Biden's America. And there's kind of a realignment where like, well, Russia stands for traditional values, you know what I mean? They're not like, they don't have like the same like, oh, they're LGBTQ plus they're allies or whatever. Russia bans gay marriage, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're standing up for like traditional Western values or whatever, and there's kind of like a, ideological alignment. I mean, far-right parties in Europe for a long time have been getting financial support from Russia.
Yeah.
They've been getting support from Russia. You can see far-right leaders in European parliaments go and visit Putin regularly.
One of the biggest ones that just happened was with the German election, the French election that happened earlier in 2024. I forget what Le Pen got showed that she had some correlation with Putin, and then I forgot what her name is, but the leader of the AfD party in Germany, she like a large portion of her party has like direct contact with Russian oligarchs in Russia. Like it's not even, they're not even trying to hide it. It's literally showing it like, oh, we do have Russian ties.
Yeah, and I mean, there's this kind of allegiance among the far right, just like internationally with Russia. You know what I mean? Like the far right all across like the West is in line and is in bed with like these Russian oligarchs, and they hang out with them like all the time.
Yeah.
And they speak of them favorably.
Yeah, that's true. It is crazy to see the shift happen. Like, you would never have thought 40 years ago that you would see the Republican Party wanting like more siding with Russia at this point. Would you think Reagan in the 80s would have ever thought that? Seeing that happen? Yeah, he would never have thought. He was one of the most, like, he hated the Soviet Union. He despised them. And if he saw what the modern Republican Party turned into, he would have thought that was just a new party. He would have never thought it was the same party that he ran for.
Yeah, it's a long way from calling it like the empire of evil. It's like, it really is that kind of like, they feel as though, because there's, this is kind of getting a little like domestic, but like, there's like, like they're saying people that like believe in like gay rights or whatever, or like DEI people are like not Americans, you know what I mean? They're against America, they're trying to destroy it from the inside. They're like internal enemies. And in that kind of way, like the Russian, like what like the Russians stand for. I mean, this is a country that literally decriminalized beating your wife.
Oh, I saw. Yeah, I knew about that.
And they had to reverse it because it was so unbelievably bad, right? Like it was so bad that even like the Russian government had to step back and save face and like revert it. But like that kind of a country, like what that kind of country stands for, I mean, this is like anecdotal, but like you can see people, in like Western countries, going on and seeing like videos of like feminist protesters being beat up by Russian police, and they're like, oh, that's how we should treat them over here. And it's like, that's what they believe. That's what they genuinely believe. They're like, the Russians are doing it correctly. We should be more like them because they like stand for traditional values. And I think that is also part of this like shift for the right in terms of like what they believe in. It's not necessarily even pulling out of world affairs. It's kind of switching sides. You know what I mean? Saying like, Russia is our enemy. It's like the liberal EU is our enemy. What's the Trump campaigner's name from 2016? Like he was the main head of the Trump campaign in 2016.
Not Steve Bannon.
No, it's the other.
Oh, Lewandowski?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he said like it was his like the new like world order, you know what I mean, like the DEI stuff and all that was headquartered in Brussels. So like he's like, you have to destroy the EU to like destroy this, you know what I mean? So it kind of like indicates like this shift over.
I always thought it was funny though seeing like some of the drastic comparisons of people's beliefs on communism in the Republican Party or just in different parties in general, because I saw a lot of people like making comments on when Kamala was doing her race, like, oh, she's a communist, but then they'd also be like, they like Putin. Like, how can you, like, the juxtaposition of, like, if you dislike communism, how can you like Russia? But,
I mean, even with that, I mean, like Trump has like talked highly of Xi Jinping, the leader of the largest communist party on earth.
Yeah.
In his weird Trump way, where he said no actor could play him. No actor could play him because he's such a great man that no actor could betray him possibly. And it's like, that's such a weird thing to say as like the American president, but
I wonder if that came out because was it Xi Jinping that was portrayed in one of the movies that came out? I'm trying to remember.
Are you talking about that one where it was the Sony movie where they tried assassinating?
the-
It was the.
Is it the interview?
It's the interview.
It might be.
That was
I
like-
think that's
No, that was-
Kim Jong Un.
Yeah, it was Kim
assassinating
Jong Un.
Kim
Yeah.
It was Kim Jong Un or it was Kim Il Sung, the person before him. I forget which one they
I
were
think
trying to
it was
assassinate.
Kim Jong Un.
I think it probably was Kim Jong Un, but it was that one. That was the big ordeal. I remember that.
I know some of like the restrictions to this kind of go because, isn't it like Winnie the Pooh?
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah.
They like banned Winnie the Pooh in China because people compared him to so much.
Yeah, there was a video game that came out like years ago that was it was like a horror video game, but they had like a hidden like joke that was like comparing Xi Jinping to Winnie the Pooh, and the like video game got banned. Like it was like restricted from a bunch of different websites and stuff because of it.
yeah, and I mean, just like, if you're like sitting in Xi Jinping's office in Beijing right now, you're kicking yourself with joy because America is like dismantling its empire
Literally,
essentially in front of
do
your
a
eyes.
thing and they're winning. That's all they can
Yeah, I
do.
mean,
They're just
like-
sitting there.
And especially if like we just like cancel our I mean, I don't know if there's been talks about canceling our security agreements with Taiwan, but I mean like,
I don't think it's a bit more hawkish against China than Russia. We're seeing it now. I feel like he would be a lot less likely for him to pull out of something like helping South Korea, Japan, or Taiwan, or the Philippines, or something like that. Russia, though, he would definitely, if he had the opportunity to, he would hand anything to Russia. China, I don't think he would do that. I think he knows that if he starts bowing down to even China now, then a large portion of the Republican Party is like, oh, no, you're bowing down to the communists, and they're going to turn his back on him. He has to at least be hard on one of them, and he chose to be hard on Xi Jinping instead of Putin.
well, it's kind of, I guess like kind of going back to like what people think. I mean, most people were against Iraq and Afghanistan, and
Well, the first little bit of the war,
well, yeah, for the first little bit they were hyped up about it because there was this big like we need to get revenge for 9/11 push.
It rapidly soured, though.
But yeah, it's interesting that Biden's ratings went so down and never recovered from the withdrawal from Afghanistan, even though it is something that literally every single person wanted, but leaving, we still were upset. And it's also funny because it was Trump's deal.
Yeah.
He released Taliban leaders as part of the deal from he released them in Pakistan so they could go back, and he released them for the negotiations and all that. So he set the deal in motion. Biden just carried it through, and people were very upset that we left Afghanistan, even though, we were upset that we were ever there in the first place. So it's
You were gonna make people angry regardless.
yeah.
You're gonna if you left, you were gonna be viewed as weak and like, oh, you're pulling out, you're letting the enemy take over. Wow, I can't believe you're doing this. But if you stay there, it's like, oh, we're wasting all this money in Afghanistan and we're doing nothing for it.
Oh yeah,
You're
like
gonna
they're
make-
sending young Americans to die and all
You're
this.
going to get angry people regardless. It was a lose-lose scenario, honestly. Partially the reason why I think it was so unpopular is because how sloppy it was. You gotta admit, could have been handled way better. Like how much equipment we left in Afghanistan, how fast we withdrew, how fast the collapse of the Afghan army was to the Taliban. It could have been done so much better, but that was the past. We can't do anything about it anymore.
Well, like if you wanted a better release, you'd have to invest more in Afghanistan.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So like
They would have complained about it then too.
yeah, but then it's like, why are we sending millions of dollars to build up like roads in Afghanistan? Like when I have a pothole in my like subdivision, I hate this. You know what I mean? It's like, there's kind of like the public seems very fickle on it, and they just get upset like immediately, like about like regardless, even if you're doing the right thing and like leaving, like they still get angry that you like left in the wrong way, even though we're getting out like as quick as possible.
Okay.
Just back to your point about Russia and Trump giving them like whatever they want, I think you said. I disagree just because I truly do think Trump's